Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hayzlett, and this is All Business. As we've all experienced, the way we do business, work as a team, and daily interactions has drastically changed. As we work towards the new norm, how do we make working together more effective and build stronger ties along the way? That's the big question. And my guest today is here to help leaders strengthen connections while having a more productive team. Dr. Betty Johnson is president of Bridging the Difference and author of Making Virtual Work, How to Build Performance and Relationships. Dr. Betty, welcome to All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett.
Hello. It's so nice to be here, Jeffrey. Thank you for having me.
And we're virtual too, and it works.
Yes, it does.
Let me ask you the first question. We were forced to move to a virtual way of doing business to now having to work in what we call a hybrid world. In order to be successful as leaders, we need to make this an effective pivot. What's the biggest reason teams and leaders are struggling to make the hybrid system work?
Well, I think the struggle comes from resistance, in a word. It is here to stay, despite our desire, many people's desire, to have everybody back in the office and return to the old days with which we were so comfortable. Especially leaders, executives, are very comfortable in the in-person environment. It's so familiar, and this is the way we've learned to lead, is by being able to make those spontaneous in-person connections with people. So there's a reason why we miss everybody being all together. And of course, there are also some compelling tax reasons why you want all those backsides in seats, but it's not realistic. Not this year, not next year, not ever. And the reason I say that is because globally distributed teams have been here for a while. We just got dissatisfied with that dynamic when it became pervasive, and those who lived in the same city as us were now also virtual. The reason we became so dissatisfied, I maintain, is because we were trying to apply those norms with which we as leaders were so comfortable in a different context. And those norms failed us. So we wore people out. We created disenfranchisement. We contributed to the big quit, which is now what many of my clients are calling the great resignation. Others call it the great reshuffle. But at the end of the day, what happens to me as an executive is people quit and I have to replace them. So this churn of talent is real, and it's not going away either, even with a recession, because people have found that they can bargain for the work environment that they choose. So it's up to us as leaders to be adaptive. You know, Ron Heifetz has been banging the table on adaptive leadership for some time now. And here we have the perfect petri dish for adaptive leadership. So let's start changing up the composition of what's in that dish and get better results.
Well, I want to ask myself, can I teach an old dog new tricks? I mean, I like the way we're working today, meaning virtual from different offices. I've been doing it all my career. I've never, even though I've had an office, I'm never hardly there. And I've always done it virtually, but I do love working from home. And I'm even seeing some of the major, corporation executives saying they're not going back into the office full time, at least. So can we teach an old dog new tricks?
Well, I consider myself an old dog, right? I've been around the block a few times, and I'm guessing from your comment that you have as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And if I can learn new tricks, anyone can.
Yeah.
What we need is a different motivation for those new tricks. And so that's a big part of what my book is about. What is your motivation as a leader? Is your motivation to control or enable? Is your motivation to feel good about you and your status and your ability to make decisions? Or is your motivation to enhance the capabilities of your people to do their work? Is your motivation to hog leadership, or is your motivation to distribute it? This is really all about getting from where you want to be from where you are now to where you want to be. And we know, study after study shows us, this is not by just simply employing tactics. It's about changing up the way you think about things.
Yeah, it's getting to the core and the source of who you are and the way you want to operate. You know, everybody's calling this like the Great Resignation. You kind of mentioned that. I look at it as the Great Transformation, meaning if we look at it as a Great Resignation, we're almost saying we lost. Someone loses here. It's not good. Someone loses, someone wins. In my opinion, this is really a great transformation. This is just a different way of doing it. And we're getting to a holistic kind of way of doing it, a better way of doing it, and still getting the results that we want, and sometimes better.
I completely agree with you. And what I like about the way you're framing this is the phrase, the Great Resignation, or the Big Quit, or the Great Reshuffle, or whatever we want to call it.
Negative.
When we use that language, we disempower ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We're saying, I can't control this. And
Right.
I'm here to say, you can absolutely influence what you're experiencing in terms of turnover. You and how you lead has everything to do with whether you keep your people. I mean, sure, there are people who will jump for a bigger pay increase. But when they go to a place where they don't experience the kind of leadership that they did with you, that they so enjoyed, where they thrived, they come back.
Yeah, we lost a few people toward the end of COVID, but that was a normal kind of thing. But out of our team, it was not a major resignation like I've seen with other companies. And I kind of pride our team in doing that, and how we kind of grasp onto the virtual side, team meetings, a little bit of, water cooler stuff, which gets me to this next question. How can we stop wasting time in video meetings without sacrificing work relationships?
Well, that's the subject of a 276-page academic research paper and an 85-page book that boils it down. But really, I guess the way I can be most helpful to your listeners is to say, there are two things that you really need to do. These are table stakes. And if you're not doing them, you need to start now. The first is you need to have a target outcome every time you call a meeting, and don't keep it to yourself. Put it in the subject line of the invite. If you're calling a meeting and you in the subject line, you say weekly team meeting, you're failing. Yeah. And here's why. You're not showing your people how they need to come to the meeting, what to get ready for, how to positively anticipate. This is going to be a good meeting. This is going to be a useful investment of my time, and I am going to speak and be heard. So whatever that target outcome is, whether it is to make some decisions about how to mitigate risks, whether it is to discuss and decide upon what our work in the office rule is going to be, put that, what's going to be accomplished in the meeting, in the subject line, so people know, A, what are they saying yes to when they accept your invitation? And then B, when they're racing from the previous meeting into your meeting, what do they need to be teed up to talk about, ready to problem solve to? Marty Seligman, when he names the 5 dimensions for well-being, accomplishment is the 5th of his PERMA model. But even Martin Seligman, rock star of well-being, says, for me, accomplishment trumps everything. It is what I need to experience the most in order to be healthy psychologically. So tee people up for that accomplishment. And the second thing is really an inverse practice, counterintuitive. And that is to make time for small talk right at the front of your agenda. Put it in the agenda. My research participants say they want 10 minutes of small talk. Now that's if it's a 20-minute meeting or an hour-long meeting. Why? Because if we don't make space for people to authentically connect with each other in a way that's not structured or orchestrated, these round robin check-ins, that's not small talk. That's the leader being the puppet master and staying at the center as the hub with other people being spokes. We're talking about an integrated conversation where anybody who wants to chime in on their weekend, their vacation plans, or what's happening in the world or this country in terms of the things that are on their mind. When you carve out space in your agenda for that, watch how on time people will show up, because they're craving authentic connection. And then for people who are kind of like me, so driven by accomplishment that small talk drives them crazy. Well, they can show up a few minutes late, right? Get that last email out the door and then show up for the last few minutes of small talk. So it gives this leeway for people to arrive late without being disrupting the meeting flow. It gives people who need social connection. Some people need it more than others. It gives them a place to have it. And here's a little tidbit that I just find fascinating. Those who are self-described as introverts benefit more from that 10 minutes of small talk than extroverts do.
Wow.
So think about this. When you're an introvert, you process information internally. So when we're in the business of a meeting, I'm soaking up all this information, what I'm hearing, what I'm reading, and I'm trying to make sense of it so that I can then ask a question. It takes me longer than the extroverts.
So, Dr. Betty, we're always needing to evolve. How should leaders rethink what engagement is in a meeting? Because sometimes I get frustrated, I'll ask a question and everybody just sits there for a little bit, and then someone takes a spark and goes first. And then, so how can I reset the engagement?
Well, there are two things with this as well. So the first is, let's get a common definition of engagement. Csikszentmihalyi, who coined the term flow, says engagement is you are so into the work that you lose your sense of time. You're so enjoying what's happening that you're all in. So there's no temptation to multitask because you're loving it. So we need to create that kind of engagement rather than measuring engagement as to whether people have their camera on and they're staring at it. Right? That's not engagement. That's performance. That's performing arts. That's being on stage and striving to create an impression versus truly being engaged in the work. And the way that we create engagement in the work is we don't just tell people this is what we're going to talk about. We craft an agenda in the form of questions, and we assign each question in the agenda to the attendee who has the most subject matter expertise on that question. When you do that, you distribute the leadership responsibility of the meeting, and you say to people, here's an invitation. I want you to talk about this particular question that we need an answer to in order to hit that target outcome that's in the calendar invite.
What about a leader? Let me ask you a question about a leader, because I'm the chairman, CEO, but I don't usually lead the meetings. I let other people lead the meetings. Is that a good thing, bad thing, what?
Well, I think it depends on how the CEO is thinking about letting other people lead. In other words, are you providing the example that if we don't have a target outcome for this meeting, we're not having a meeting?
We don't. That's a definite for my meetings. Like, what is the purpose? We usually talk about what is the purpose of the meeting right up front. So we all know, we do our small talk. We do a lot of that. And then all of a sudden say, well, we got it. Let's get moving. And then we usually say, okay, what's the purpose of the meeting? So we all know where we're coming from. Usually that's stated ahead of time, but not everybody reads everything. Not everybody pays attention.
Well, so I want to really just dig in on this. What is our purpose? Where are we coming from is one thing. A target outcome is where are we going and where are the goalposts on this football field? How will we know when we have a touchdown? So having that goal that in this meeting, we are going to hit this target outcome gives people a way to know what contributions are relevant and what contributions aren't. How should the meeting be designed? How should it not be designed? Who should be there? Who gets a buy? It doesn't have to be at this weekly meeting because they're not going to be contributing. So that nuance between purpose and target outcome is absolutely essential, and it's looked over by most people.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, because everybody's done this, but I want to talk about multitasking. What's the impact of multitasking during a meeting? Now, I do my best never to do it during an interview, but sometimes we do it during the meeting. We check our phone, we see an email, we respond to a text real quick. What's the impact of that?
The impact of multitasking can be really positive or negative. I think the bigger question is, how do we keep people from doing the negative kind of multitasking, right? So multitasking can be really good. If I'm making a note, it looks as if I'm disengaged, right? I'm doing it right now. I'm making a note because I want to remember. And so that's not disengagement. That's thinking. And many, many people must look away from the visual distraction, the animation, to look down to a quiet place and make a note. It's how they process. So, point one, don't think people are disengaged just because they're looking down. It doesn't mean they're necessarily checking their cell phone. The second thing is, if the conversation is useful to them, they will not do the useless multitasking activity because they don't want to miss anything. So the answer to how to avoid that disruptive multitasking is, if someone's contributions aren't essential to the meeting and what they're going to hear from other people is not essential to their job, find another way to get their voice in the room. Don't have them attend an hour meeting and speak for 5 minutes. Yeah.
And the other thing, I can remember sitting in a meeting with a client, a very, very well-known individual. Everybody's a world-renowned expert, and was doing some work with him and his team. And I remember I was taking notes on my computer while I was sitting there at the conference room, and he yelled at me and said, "Shut that computer down." And I said, "I'm taking notes." He said, "You are not. Shut the computer down." I shut the computer down, and I fired the client on the spot and left. Because, again, didn't respect the way that I needed to take notes, the way I wanted to do it, because I don't write things on paper anymore and so forth. I think it's interesting. Where does this gets into the balance of power, maybe a balance of responsibility for the meeting experience? Who does it reside in? And whether it's a meeting by video, a conference call, or in person, who does that responsibility really reside?
The person who initiates the meeting and is the facilitator, or the person who kicks it off, the one who's responsible for crafting at least the draft agenda, they are responsible for setting the stage. And setting the stage is everything. If you think of a meeting as a social construct, which Helen Schwartzman back in 1986 made a case for this. We show up and we think it's a work tool, and maybe it's that, but it's really a social construct where there are these tacit agreements in play. And when people do things that offend us, we get upset. And when people do things that make us feel good, we want to work with them more. It's social. So the way you set the stage for this social encounter is you do things like putting the target outcome in the invite, deciding who needs to be there and who doesn't to hit that target, crafting your agenda in the form of questions. And here's the thing, if you don't have any questions, you don't have a meeting. You have a big fat tail. So record yourself and send it out instead of wasting people's synchronous time, right? Yeah, so the responsibility lies with that person. And then if you do a good job in setting the stage, your meeting attendees will be able to come and share the ownership of what happens in the meeting. But there are some things you need to do, and that's what's in the recipe in my book.
I got time for 2 quick questions. So the first one I want to know is, what should all companies make sure to incorporate when planning virtual and hybrid meetings so they're most impactful and beneficial for everyone? What's the most important piece of that?
The most important piece of that is to have empathy. So this is your North Star. And empathy in this context means you understand how your people are feeling cognitively. And then you also relate to it emotionally, their feelings, not yours. Oh, I feel the same as you. No, you don't feel the same as me, right? We all feel differently. So let it resonate, but don't try to mimic it. This is impossible. And then design your meetings so that you're giving people what they need for that emotional state. Now, this just sounds very kumbaya and woo-woo and, too soft. And I don't have time for that. But I'm insisting that you do have time because it's a time saver. You do have time because it reduces your turnover. So it's that empathy that's really the cornerstone of that 85-page book. What does empathy look like in the remote and hybrid meeting context? What exactly do you do? It's not rocket science, but it will change up what happens in your meetings and what happens after.
Yeah, and it'll also turn you from the great resignation into the great transformation. I'll guarantee you that if you do that. All right, one last quick question, 30 seconds left to go. What is the one thing leaders should start implementing today to increase productivity and build stronger team bonds besides empathy?
Well, it all starts with empathy. So it's not just besides, it's embedded. I would say because cameras are so contentious, poll your team and find out how they feel about camera use. Start there to meet their needs. If people don't want cameras on, if they don't think they're essential to the meeting, make them optional.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's tough to do if you're a TV company, video company, but that I can get it. All right. We've been talking with Dr. Betty Johnson, president of Bridging the Difference and author of the bestseller, Making Virtual Work, How to Build Performance and Relationships. I know I learned a few things. Dr. Betty, thanks for being a part of All Business right here on C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV.
Thank you.
Hey, at the end of every show, I like to talk about what I learned. And I like the way she said, frame what the outcome of the meeting is going to be. Now, I always do that with our team, right? The first thing I say is, what are we going to accomplish from this meeting? Now, she's saying doing it a little bit nicer, and also to make sure you put that up front. I've always put in there our weekly meetings, our ops meetings, whatever those might be, but it would be great to put the real big topic in there, wouldn't it? And the big accomplishment. So that's something that I learned, and it will be a little bit easier for everybody to know so they won't have to second guess or go looking for the agenda and everything else that you got to have. It would be great to be able to have. That's what I learned right here from Dr. Betty Johnson from Charlotte, North Carolina. And of course, what a great guest right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett on C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV. Don't forget, tell your friends.
Everybody, welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winter-Brill. We're here with Evan Sanchez. He's the author of Sell Like a Champ, Mindsets, Tool Sets, and Skill Sets for Peak Performance in Sales. It's great to have you with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I enjoyed reading your book because I come from a very sort of athletic mentality, myself excluded though. But your book is all about the championship mentality. And you talk about your transformation, Evan, how you grew up as an athlete.
Yes.
And you suffered an injury, and then
Yes.
you used that skill set to become a corporate athlete, which I thought was ingenious, and sort of this transformation that you experienced.
Exactly.
So just tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Well, I think that's really what life is all about, is finding ways to pivot and transform into your next level of performance or your next level of life.
Right.
And for me, growing up, my vision was always to be a professional athlete. I was a very good soccer player. I swam, I did martial arts, I played football, and I was all about sports, and I did good in school too, but I always knew that I was going to be a professional athlete. And then growing up, I had injury after injury after injury until they told me, guess what? You're not going to be a professional athlete. And that was pretty devastating,
Sure.
At 18, 19 years old, to find out that, you were at the top of your game. I was playing Olympic development. I was playing semi-professional. I was, in the top 5 in the state, and I was expected to be a professional. That's it, right? I was only going to college so that I could get a little older and play professional. And now suddenly all of that was taken away. And so, that was really rough, trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do now? And in some cases it was, school was okay, but wasn't really what I planned on doing. Didn't really have any really big ambitions or goals after that. And I was lost for about 10 years. And a buddy of mine and I were personal trainers, and we were trying to figure out how to motivate our clients, because we had clients that if they did what we told them, they would get tremendous results. And then there was the ones that didn't do what we told them, and all they did was whine and complain that they weren't getting the results. And we're like, what is it? What is that, that intrinsic thing that makes somebody actually desire the success or take action for their desires in order to achieve that success?
Take action, right.
And that's really where we started this, hey, I'm going to train you, you're going to train me, we're going to challenge each other, we're going to put each other through this program and really try and figure it out. And the coolest thing is that's when my transformation came about, because what I realized was that I wasn't a has-been. I was actually still a professional athlete up here, and I could apply that to help other people. And not just helping other people to achieve, losing 30 pounds or being able to play with their kids or something to that effect, but really just helping them to achieve their dreams, because we all have this thing inside of us that we dream about, and we know who we are inside, we know ourselves. And sometimes when those things are taken away, it isn't truly gone, it's just a different path that you're going to take, utilizing those same skills that you had in a different way. And that's really where the transformation to the corporate athlete came about, right?
Right.
Where I was like, hey, you know, I really think that I've got something here. I can be an entrepreneur. I can start a business, and I can teach other people what it's like to have this championship mentality, because the mentality didn't leave. It was just my physical ability to actually perform at the high level that was no longer available to me.
Right. How do you know if you're a champ, a contender, or a chump?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between all those?
Well, so many people hate the word sales, right? And a lot of the companies and the salespeople that I work with, they don't want to sell. They think they don't need to sell, or they have this negative connotation to it. And so in the portrait of a sales champ, when we create that portrait, what we do is say, basically, if you're selling like a champ, you're helping others. You're helping to build one another up around you. You're doing it with a positive perception. You have high levels of energy. You're focused on what you're doing, and it's for a good thing. You're solving problems, and you're helping people get what they want.
Right.
Who doesn't want to do that, right?
Exactly.
So that's really all sales is. Now, when you're selling like a chump, you're selling something that you don't believe in. And you're typically putting other people down, you know, competing, talking about why you're better than they are. They also suffer from what I call LOF, or lack of focus, right? They can't stay focused on things. They usually are burnt out. They don't have a lot of energy, and they're doing their best just to make it day by day by day. And these are the people that you see that are desperately trying to sell something. And when you run into a person who is desperately trying to sell you something, you can feel it.
You can feel it.
And it's just icky. And that's when people go, oh, I don't want to be a salesperson, because they felt that before, right? So we call that selling like a chump. Now, selling like a contender is somebody who doesn't really sell like a champ yet. Maybe they're new to the game, they haven't done it quite yet, or maybe they just don't have consistency. And so some of these inconsistencies have them fall down into selling like a chump, because the number one determinant as to whether or not you're selling like a champ is whether or not you're hitting your quota or you're able to pay your bills.
Correct.
Right?
Okay. So just out of curiosity, why did you decide to put it into print? What sparked the interest in writing it down and writing a book?
Well, my company is called Springboard Consulting, and we believe that by elevating people's thinking, we can elevate their business. And in all the sales trainings that I have been to, the big guys, right, the guys that we compete against, when you are not performing as a rep, so Sales Management Training 101, the first thing they say is, if a rep isn't performing well, you need to look at their sales skills and their knowledge of the product and service. There's no mention of the mentality. And if you look at most businesses today, they have a group of top 10% performers, or A players. They have their B, C, and D players. So if all of these people have been through the same sales skills training,
right,
all of them have been through the same product and service knowledge training, what's the differentiator? What's the difference?
Right. Mentality?
What is it? It's the championship mentality. It's higher levels of confidence, it's higher levels of ambition. It's also the fact that when you have these higher levels of confidence, you don't let what we call stinking thinking get in the way of your success, right? You're not beating yourself up, you're not overly self-conscious, you know, you're just operating at a whole other level because of this ambition and confidence, where you're not letting the stress and the negative self-talk of stinking thinking get in the way of your performance.
So Evan, do you think everybody can be taught that mentality? I mean, using some of the techniques in your book, is that something that some people just say, I can't do it? Like, you know, there are people who leave sales because they're so frustrated. Do you believe that all of the people that left probably could have, using some of these techniques and tools, could have succeeded into that championship mentality?
I do.
Yeah.
I do, because I do believe that the championship mentality can be applied to anything, right? There's things that you want to do, and there's things that you don't want to do in life, and we actually use that as part of our coaching psychology. But the things that you want to do are the things that you're passionate about. When you're passionate about something, it's easy for you to share your message, right? It's easy to talk about.
Right.
And so I could ask you, you know, what your favorite restaurant is, and you could probably sell it to me all day long. Why is it your favorite restaurant?
Right.
Right? But if I give you a product or service and I say, okay, now go sell this to the buyer, It's a little bit different. And the reason it's different is because you have to believe in it. And so when we look at these different mindsets in the book, the first part of the book is mindsets. And you hear people say, oh, well, you got to believe to achieve, or it's the power of positive thinking, right? And you got to be more positive. It's more than that. It's about meeting you where you are, right? Because some people may say, oh yeah, I believe in the product and service, but maybe they don't know how to put their vision into action. Maybe they are overly stressed, so they're not able to be positive. So through our breakdown of the different mindsets, they kind of build upon one another. Mm-hmm. So as the reader's going through and looking at each module, there are some coaching points in there, and we call them springboards, to help you elevate your thinking.
Right, I like, you mentioned earlier, elevate your thinking, elevate your business.
Right, absolutely. So you hit the springboard to help elevate your thinking so that you can elevate your business. And if you've got that mentality down, then you go on to the next one. And in some cases, you may have to stack the different mentalities on top of one another in order to start adopting these different mindsets that are championship mindsets. And everybody has access to them. You just don't know what you don't know.
So there's so many mindsets. You have the expect success mindset, that's a tongue twister, the vision and action mindset, reality mindset, I could go on. Of those three, just give us a little nugget of one of them and sort of what it entails.
Right, so expect success is that when I set myself to a particular goal or to a particular vision, I expect that that's going to happen. If I can envision it in my mind and I can envision the future being so, I can imagine the emotions tied to that. I can imagine the people that are close to me. I can imagine maybe some of the obstacles that might get in the way and how I'm going to overcome them. When I can expect success, that actually helps bring that vision into reality. And as an example, I used to tell people, taking a penalty shot, playing soccer. I used to walk by the referee and I used to tell him my number. And they'd go, what? What do you mean? And I'd go, my number is number 1. Go ahead and put it down because I'm putting this in the net. Because they had to write down your jersey number after you scored, right? And so I would expect success and I would make that so. That's expect success.
How did you come up with these mindsets? Because you have the growth mindset, the expect success.
Well, I do have a background in sports psychology, and I've been studying this for years and years and years. And like I said, I look at the different psychologies that are out there. I look at the different performance things that have come out over the years. And at the end of the day, you can break them up into these little mindsets. And I thought it was a lot easier than trying to, bring a whole bunch of psychobabble and psychology stuff to people to just say, hey, here's one mindset, master this one. Take 3 to 6 months and see if you can master this mindset. And once you've done that, let's stack the next one on. Right. And so eventually we can start to build you higher and higher and higher. Very similar to the way you would with a personal training client, right? Somebody comes in and they want to lose 30 pounds. Well, you're not training them like an Olympic athlete.
Right.
You're going to meet them where they're at, and you're going to find out where their mindset is. And then we're going to look for the next thing to elevate their thinking, to elevate their performance.
That's great. Like I said, it all flows into the next. So those are the mindsets. But then you also have, as per the title, tool sets and skill sets.
Exactly.
Now those are different?
They're different. So the first part is all about the mentality, right? I've got to have the right mentality before I can actually get myself to take some type of action.
Right.
Because you have to think about something before you can actually take action on something. And we broke down the middle part of the book on tool sets around what I've found to be the top 10 behaviors for most salespeople. So behaviors are things that I can see somebody doing, or I can hear them saying these things. And so when we do sales coaching with those, I'll actually have the coachee kind of rank themselves on a scale of 1 to 5. How are you on these behaviors? And as they rank themselves in the book, they'll get a score at the very bottom, and it'll tell them whether or not they're selling like a champ, they're selling like a contender, or they're selling like a chump. And so based upon that, then we actually have a plan of action, right? Where are the areas where they were strong? Where are the areas where they needed some improvement? And how do we put that into an action plan, create the vision so we can put that vision into action?
Right.
They've understood the mentality, the mindset of vision into action from earlier in the book, so now they're able to apply that behaviorally.
It's all very methodical. That's why I enjoyed it. It just kind of flows from one step to the next. Something I did print out because I really enjoyed this. You have chump self-talk versus champ self-talk, and you have sort of the equivalent. What was the genesis of this chart? I thought it was really cute, for lack of a better word.
It's all about being able to identify that there's a different way of thinking, right? And this all goes back to the whole transformation that I went through personally. You know, something was taken away and I thought, oh, it'll never be. Right. It's the end. And so you have this self-talk a lot of times that becomes your own worst enemy. And that's essentially what a lot of the book is about, is that know yourself so that you're not your own worst enemy. Right. And so, you know, I had an example where I was waiting in line at a 7-Eleven one time, and this older gentleman in front of me was buying a lotto ticket. It was taking forever. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, these people are driving me crazy, right? They're just idiots. Well, that's stinking thinking, right? Positive way of thinking, and this is what actually happened to me at that 7-Eleven that made me kind of realize the differences, is that if I was so smart, what can I do to speed this up? Because I needed to go to work. That's one of the reasons I was angry and pissed off and thinking these people need to hurry up, right? But I flipped it to, well, what can I do to help?
So I'll let readers take a look at this whole chart, just a couple. You know, an example of, you say chump self-talk would be, I've never been able to sell before. Champ self-talk is translated into, it's an opportunity to grow and learn something new. You know, it's just a slight tweak. I don't have what I need. Chump self-talk. I don't have what I need, as opposed to necessity is the mother of invention. Very clever. Right. And one more I liked, I'll never be good at this. Chump self-talk. Champ self-talk, I'll give it another try.
Exactly.
So they all, same message, but completely different sort of.
Totally different way of looking at it. And one of the reasons we put that in there is because sales likes to complain about marketing a lot. Right. It's very true. And conversely, the C-suite, the CFOs and finance like to complain a lot about the salespeople. So, you know, when they're looking at these different areas and they're having these different conflicts within the office, there's chump self-talk and there's champ self-talk. And if you can adopt the champ self-talk, it's going to be a lot more positive, it's going to bring positive energy, and it's also going to bring a much better environment to which you can actually be successful in versus a toxic environment that will continue to bring you down. So Evan, we've touched upon the mindsets, some of the tool sets, but what about the skill sets? Yeah, so the skill set section is the third part because it also takes skills, right? I said in the beginning that if you're wanting to train a sales force or you're wanting to improve your own sales performance, there are sales skills that have to be learned, and there is product and service knowledge, and then of course there's the championship mentality that has to be applied. These sales skills, however, are very important, and it's not so much about the type of sales, because nowadays you have, well, is it better to be a consultative salesperson or a relationship-oriented salesperson, or the challenger sale is a real big one that's out right now. And at the end of the day, it all really comes down to how well can you communicate? How well can you share your passion and your message and get it out there to help other people? And the primary skills for doing that is really knowing yourself, knowing how to control yourself so that you can build trust and rapport with others faster, and understanding how to know somebody else's preferences. What are the things that they're going to be looking for based upon their own communication styles, and then how can I modify in order to do that? So the whole last section, we don't just leave sales skills out. There's certainly some specific sales skills that we've found that really help to amplify any type of sales process, any type of sales style, whatever you have done to this point. If you apply these sales skills, you will elevate your performance. Right. This
isn't new, but I like how you package it. You know, we've heard this stuff before, but chump versus champ, it's, you know, the alliteration, it all works. So,
well, the positive mindset, right? So you're right. Most people, their internal self-talk, 80% of it is negative. So how do we flip that to being 80% positive?
It's true, and it's amazing. I mean, your story, we touched upon in the beginning, just your transformation as a, you know, from an athlete to a corporate athlete. It's really incredible and just you really feel for you because you gave us so much detail and sort of what you experience. So it's a great read, and it really flows. It was
really
a
difficult time, and it was also a good time to overcome and to move forward with.
Yeah, it must have been cathartic too.
Yeah, absolutely. It was moving from anger to joy.
Right. It's a lesson. This is your first book, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Slam dunk, the championship mentality. If you'd like more information on the book, just head to our website, c-suitebookclub.com. That's c-suitebookclub.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV.
Welcome to C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg. Even as political gridlock stalls a number of ESG advances, there are corporations and corporate leaders who are seeing their environmental, social, and government strategies literally pay off. Here to talk about how Royal DSM is boosting its bottom line, even while it makes the world a better and cleaner place, is Hugh Welch. He's the company's North American president. Welcome, Hugh.
Thanks, Greg. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. And before we get into Royal DSM's environmental strategies, tell me a little bit more about Royal DSM.
Thanks, Greg, for the opportunity. The acronym DSM actually stands for Dutch State Mines. And we started out as a coal mining company in the Netherlands 117 years ago. And over the last century, we've continued to evolve and adapt to be a company that's capable of meeting the changing needs of the world. First in petrochemicals, and now today, where we're the largest nutrition company in the world, making all the letter vitamins I'm sure you're familiar with, probiotics, enzymes, yeasts, food ingredients, engineering plastics that go into your electronics and your cars, biomedical materials, clean energy like solar and bio-based products such as biofuels. It's really a spectacular company that now more stands for do something meaningful than Dutch State Mines.
Let's talk a little bit more about clean energy. How is Royal DSM future-proofing the company with regard to climate change?
Yeah, we look at it in three ways. We improve our own operations, our own fuel, our own energy efficiency, our own greenhouse gas emissions, our own renewable electricity standards. We enable our customers to do the same by producing lower carbon products and helping them be more energy efficient and more sustainable. And more we find ourselves advocating in Washington or Shanghai or Brussels for a price on carbon, for climate change legislation, for measures that governments can do to make us all create a more sustainable planet.
And you also have the largest solar field in the state of New Jersey, right where your corporate headquarters is. Tell me about that.
Well, we certainly have to walk the talk on our own operations, and we're very proud of the fact that in January we opened not only the largest solar field in New Jersey, but it's the second largest net solar field east of the Mississippi. It covers 62 acres. It has 63,000 solar panels. Those solar panels actually have DSM technology on them, anti-reflective coatings. And at peak sunshine in June, they can produce 100% renewable electricity for a very large 500-acre manufacturing plant.
Tell me about Project Clean Cow. I mean, it sounds funny, but it's deadly serious, right?
It certainly is. I mean, most folks by now realize that cows are a meaningful contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, either through AOC's Green New Deal or in some of the other conversations we've had as a society over the course of the last few months with respect to cows, hamburgers, etc. Good news, you get to keep your hamburger because we make the cows cleaner. DSM has invented a feed ingredient we call Clean Cow, or 3-NOP, that inhibits the production of methane in a cow's stomach. And as a consequence, the methane emissions from the cow, and for the folks watching, 95% are burps, not out the rear end, we can reduce those methane emissions by up to 30%. And that is a meaningful reduction in methane emissions from cows. And there are 1.3 billion cows worldwide. So if we can get this feed ingredient in each cow, I think many of the countries around the world will be able to meet their Paris Accord commitments pretty easily.
All right, we've talked about carbon and solar. Now let's take a dip into water. You have a sustainable aquaculture division at Royal DSM. I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, we formed a joint venture with the German company Evonik called Veramaris. It's the Latin word for green ocean. And what we do there is we produce an aquaculture feed that will enable folks to eliminate the need to feed fish, wild-caught fish, to grow farm-raised fish. So most people don't understand that to grow a pound of farm-raised fish, you need to feed them several pounds of wild-caught fish so they get sufficient omega-3 to grow. We've identified an algae, candidly under a rock up in Oregon, that we can put in a fermenter. We feed it dextrose or sugar, and it can produce high-potency EPA and DHA, or omega-3, that you can feed a farm-raised fish such that you never have to feed it a wild-caught fish. And to put it into some context, we're building a plant in Blair, Nebraska. That plant will open in July. That plant will be able to replace 2.5 million metric tons of wild-caught fish. That's the equivalent of all the wild-caught fish on an annual basis in the Mediterranean Sea.
And your executives are walking the talk as well with regard to their compensation. They're getting something called green bonuses. How do those work?
Yeah, we're a company where we put our money where our mouth is. I mean, literally our money. So the 350 executives in DSM worldwide, including myself, have half of our short-term incentive or our annual bonus and about half of our long-term incentive, our stock options, tied not to financial performance, but to sustainability metrics, things like greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency, employee engagement survey results, and safety. And what we found is it enables us to drive our strategy so much better up and down the line if everybody has a little bit of their own money tied to achieving these non-traditional results.
And then finally, how do all these sustainability initiatives affect your bottom line, the company's bottom line? Because you already pay a nice dividend, but it seems as though these green initiatives are also paying dividends.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be a time where they said a company had a choice. You can either do well or do good. And about 10 years ago, we decided, no, we're going to be the company that can do well and do good. And over the course of the last 10 years, in carrying out this corporate Darwinism, we've actually tripled our share price. And we trade on the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. During that time, the Amsterdam index was about flat. 2017 was a record profit year for DSM, and in 2018 it was even a better record profit year. We increased our EBITDA by 26%, and we expect 2019 to be pretty well as well. We pay a healthy dividend. Our employees are very happy. We've repurposed our acronym, DSM, to stand for Do Something Meaningful, and we continue to return superior results for our shareholders.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on and talking about it.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for watching C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg.